What do you make of the extension?
The extension appears to be illegal. The law allows for one 90-day extension if the president can demonstrate that a sale is underway and there needs to be more time for the negotiations in the administration. That is not what's happened here. What's happened here is Trump has just declared 75 days of a free pass for TikTok. And there does not seem to be any statutory support for that. This is an example of how the social media corporations have really come to plunder the American town square. There's an old saying in tech that if you're not paying, you're the product. Well, big tech has productized Americans' attention spans and our social lives for the last 15 years, and both parties have failed to rein them in. And now now Trump is not only inviting American corporate abuse of the town square, he's also allowing Chinese communist abuse of it.
Congressman, the order that Trump signed yesterday called for a review of the intelligence surrounding the risk posed by TikTok. Are you concerned at all that the incoming administration might be glossing over or prepared to gloss over those risks in its eagerness to try to strike a deal and keep the app going?
Yes, and there's two core risks. One is, of course, Americans' personal data, geolocation data, personal contact information, the social graph of their lives. But the second, I think more concerningly actually, is control over the algorithm itself. What content is suppressed, what content is amplified. That is ultimately dictated by the Chinese Communist Party. And we need to be very clear about this. There's a lot of hand-waving around this. Xi Jinping makes those decisions. And what that means is that Chinese kids see very different content, mostly educational, than American kids do. And I don't know why the United States would want to outsource the education and ideological cohesion of an entire generation to our greatest adversary. Now, you underlay this ignorance of that core risk with the fact that Trump just issued a meme coin that basically is the equivalent of him opening up a Swiss bank account, inviting foreign adversaries and foreign individuals and corporate interests to deposit money into it secretly and then show him the receipts. That opens up the way for monumental corruption in the sale of TikTok.
We'll talk about Trump coin and indeed Melania's meme coin too a little bit later. But Congressman, I go back to the fact that you said that this extension is ultimately illegal. Now, you've also said that there's hand waving. Now, ByteDance in and of itself would say, look, control does not lie in China or Xi Jinping, but up to TikTok in and of itself. But going back to if indeed we did see some sort of joint venture, more US ownership of TikTok, would that in any way appease some of your national security concerns?
As with many things he says, I have no idea what Trump was talking about when he said, like, the US government would have a 50% stake or something like that. There's about 75 unanswered questions in between that statement and the actuality of it. Here's what we want, though. Here is the goal of the bill. First of all, we don't want to ban TikTok. We don't want to ban any of the social media. They're here to stay, just like radio and TV before them. But what we do want to do is reclaim control of the digital town square from this Chinese communist and American corporate malfeasance. And to do that, we need TikTok to answer to U.S. law. And then the second step is Congress needs to pierce Section 230 and establish a duty of care for all of these social media corporations. That means that we can't allow them to host things like deepfake pornography, which 98% of online deepfake videos are pornographic content targeting women non-consensually. These tech CEOs don't care. They don't have to care. They're not liable for it. Congress needs to end that.
When we're thinking, therefore, about the next steps, you seem to be going more broadly. We've had steps being taken by the CEO of Meta as well to reduce fact-checking here in the United States. How has that been a cause of anxiety for you, or is that something that you feel ultimately, yes, we could see more community focus on preserving what is said on the internet or not?
So I'm actually sympathetic to Zuckerberg's claim that fact-checking was not proving effective. Now, we can debate how accurate the fact-checking was, but the point is that people didn't believe the fact-checking, and ultimately, truth has to be communally acknowledged. And so moving towards community notes, if he can demonstrate that that's more effective in building trust and building shared consensus about the facts, I'm receptive to that. But the underlying point here is that any Web 2.0 approach to doing this is ultimately going to be ineffectual because these are walled gardens controlled by corporations, and ultimately these corporations monetize the attention span of Americans and sell off that product to the highest advertising bidder. And for so long as that is the case, they're always going to amplify the 7 deadly sins, things that foment pride and greed and lust and envy, because that's what people click on. We need a Web 3.0 transition where people have more custody of their personal data and where the algorithms are answerable to communities in a pluralistic fashion, the way that Taiwan has done so under the leadership of the digital minister.
Congressman, do you see any role for government in trying to help in this area of moderation? We've seen the direction of travel in Washington move far away from that. What do you see?
Government needs to revoke Section 230. So the tech industry will claim that Section 230 protects free expression. And it's just laughable. James Madison did not write Section 230. It was drafted in the 1990s, and it is an industry-specific shield for the social media corporations to not be liable for toxicity, for defamation, for cyber stalking and intimate privacy violations, things that are already illegal. I want to be clear about this. Things that are already torts under civil and criminal law. They are not susceptible for a duty of care to prevent them. We need to make them liable for it. And then we need to bring in the blockchain industry under regulatory clarity so that we can transition to a Web 3.0 approach to social media governance, because what's working in Web 2.0 has worked well for the tech CEOs. It has not worked well for American children.
Those are both pretty ambitious goals, Congressman. Do you see enough of a consensus in this Congress between Democrats and Republicans to be able to get both of those things done, especially with respect to Section 230, which we've been hearing about for so long?
You're certainly right that the tech lobby has been effective at crushing even marginal steps towards revoking Section 230. I will note, though, that last Congress, the chair and ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, on which I sit and which has jurisdiction over the tech industry, jointly wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal calling for the sunsetting of Section 230. Now, it didn't happen last term, but that is a significant step forward where you see bipartisan leadership towards revoking it. I think we are hitting an inflection point where Americans are tired of having toxicity pumped into the national discourse by people who get richer the more time their kids spend scrolling on their smartphones. It is time for us to move away from this phone-based childhood towards a play-based childhood. But to do that, we've got to reclaim ownership over how we talk to each other. Section 230 is the first step, and I do think we're building bipartisan support for it.
I hear you, but there was a lot of bipartisan support to ban TikTok, and then suddenly, as the hour drew near, we saw some real 180s from across the aisle, Congressman. And I go back to the TikTok case in particular, because the fact that you keep on talking about Web 3.0, you're talking about decentralization here. Well, we've heard that from a pitch of one of the wannabe owners, Frank McCourt, and indeed working with Kevin O'Leary. They want to be seeing potentially this Project Liberty. What are you thinking more broadly about their particular offer? Because they don't want the algorithm.
Yeah, Web 3.0 fundamentally is about open governance. It's about creating pluralism and creating a sense of community ownership over this. In the same way that Americans insist that our actual town squares are places where communities have an interest in upholding order and providing freedom of expression. We need the same thing for our digital town square, because that's where Americans are spending 4 to 6 hours every day taking in news, information, and entertainment. I think too many Americans just assume that the status quo over the last 15 years is all that we can expect from social media. But if you look back at every other media innovation, from the printing press in the 1500s all the way through TV and radio, you will see that there was a moment of disruption, and then new norms, conventions, and laws were established to help bring some harmony to this new way of disseminating information. The challenge here with social media is that we've had to digest this tech innovation in a much shorter amount of time. We've had less than half a generation to do it, and so the disruption has been even greater. But I do think that we are hitting an inflection point where we're going to start to adopt new roles and governance structures.